One of the problems is if you look at how the people who defend themselves respond, the things here, we prophesied in your name, we cast out demons in your name, we did mighty works in your name. And then the Lord will say, get out of here, I never knew you. That seems odd, because, aren't those very things that are listed there the things that you would expect a good Christian to do? See, but somehow they are being contrasted with those who do the will of my Father who is in heaven. You see the difficulty? Yeah, the three things that are listed seem to be exactly what we mean by doing the will of my Father who is in heaven. And even though Jesus, in the verse right ahead of it, says that's what you got to do to make it in, sorry, you guys are out. Huh?
It seems contradictory.
It seems contradictory. Now, I mean, one solution, which is not how we want to go with this, is to go the route of Calvin, John Calvin, and to say, well, it doesn't matter what you do at all, even if you do good things, if you ain't elect, too bad, you're out. Yeah, and that's
a
election.
Little bit of a stretch. Huh?
What's that?
Seems like a little bit of a stretch.
In what way? I'm curious.
Well, because it seems like, he would say, well, you're predestined this way or this way, right? So it seems like a little bit of a stretch when he just says, depart from me, you evildoers. He calls them evildoers.
The focus is on the actions. That's true. But what he never does is refer to predestination here in so many terms. It's just not here.
That too tells me that it seems like he just kind of made that doctrine up or said, well, this has to be this way.
Well, if you read Ephesians,
I know. Right. He talks about the elect, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly is a biblical teaching. The issue is, how do you use it? How do you apply it? And you have to be careful not to make that the touchstone of your theology, which in many regards Calvin does. Because what Calvin is interested in promoting is the sovereignty of God. Now, that's a constant theme in Calvinist churches, the sovereignty of God. God is in charge. God does whatever he jolly well pleases. And how do you underscore that to his glory? By sending, more than half of humanity off to hell. There is a logic to it. However, that's not a very comforting thing, nor is that application by any means accurate and certainly not called for here in this passage. The issue of election boils down to, if people are saved, where do you find the cause of their salvation? There's only two choices. You either find the cause of salvation to be something in God or something in the individual who is saved. Are there any other options? No. That's, if you're asking the question, why is John Jones saved? It's either because of something about John Jones or it's something hidden in the depths of God and to our thinking, to our observation, that arbitrary. So, how are you going to deal with that? Now, first of all, which is it? Is the salvation of John Jones, since you have only two choices, is it due to something in John Jones or is it due to something in God? You have to say in God. John, I thought you'd say both. Yeah, but that doesn't really work too well in this case. No, see, and that's the doctrine of election, that finally it is in God. But that doesn't help us very much in order, in terms of determining who is elected, who isn't. This is a big problem in Calvinist theology over the centuries. Is, you know, every good Calvinist, the first question that's in their head is, am I elect or am I damned? Yeah, and so then what spins out of that is, well, these are things that you can look to in order to demonstrate that you in fact are elect. But Calvin listed some. One of them, interestingly, is a desire for Holy Communion. You wouldn't think that of Calvin, but remember, Calvin is not Zwingli. Yeah, they're not the same. But anyway, so, you know, and in certain Calvinist circles, notably my Dutch ancestors way back, what ends up, you know, remember the Dutch are very mercantilist people. And so what ends up being, you know, evidence that you are in fact elect. Lots of money, because after all, didn't God give Abraham all kinds of riches and that? No, you see, you know, American Christian roots are highly Calvinistic, more than anything else, you know, through the Puritans. You know, highly Calvinistic, and so does that still pop up in the modern church in terms of, you know, God loves you, so therefore He wants to make you
rich. Yeah,
rich. Oh yeah, no, you hear that? It's false. Yeah, false teaching. So, but we're back to the problem. See, and it's very easy to take this passage and to conform it to that question and that issue of the evidence for election. But I'm going to venture to say to you, it's not really about that at all. If you look at what's listed here, we prophesy in your name. That's another way of saying this early. Remember, this is first century, really early. That's another way of talking about what? Preaching, right? Yeah, it's a speaking for God, prophecy. So we're talking about preaching, exorcisms, right? Casting out demons. How many lay people, you know, did that? Yeah, no, right? And many mighty works. What are mighty works here? They're not thinking about works of charity. They're thinking about miracles. Yeah, so are these three things that are listed here in this paragraph things that you would expect ordinary Christians to be doing? Or are they the things that you would expect, I'm going to use an anachronistic word, clergy? Yeah, that doesn't really apply that early. But are these the things that you would expect clergy to be doing in this context?
Yes.
Yes. And so read this paragraph as following the paragraph that begins in verse 15. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. I'm quite convinced that what the paragraph from verse 21 on is talking about is those folks. See, those are the, it's not talking about whether you're saved or not. It's talking about whether what you are doing is legit. Are you really a person sent by God or not? And the warning then is that in spite of the fact that you are doing the kinds of things that you would expect a person sent from God to be doing, nevertheless, there are some people who are doing it, let's say, out of wrong motives, to make money. Like those guys that the Didache that I read to you last Sunday is all about. They're kind of living high off the land, but going around doing that. So I think it is better to think about this in terms of the prior paragraphs, because we always want to go to the immediate context if we're trying to figure out what a difficult thing has to say. And so I don't think it's talking really about salvation at all. Even though, admittedly, the language is somewhat similar to what you get in Matthew 25, in the speech of Jesus that includes the separating of the sheep and the goats in the There are some superficial similarities, but it's not really talking about the same thing. Buy that?
Yes.
Yeah. How then do you distinguish false prophets? This continuing problem.
By their fruits. Right when you say-
Yeah, by their fruits you will know them. Well, here again, and I'll go back to it. I did introduce it briefly last Sunday. Go back to the Old Testament, especially Deuteronomy and Jeremiah, who liked Deuteronomy. It's kind of a relationship there. And you can see, that what is said there is applicable even in our own time. The first thing, and you might recall last Sunday I mentioned that King Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, was wishy-washy, right? The princes of Judah are screaming to have Jeremiah killed because he's really bad for morale. Yeah, the city is under siege by the Babylonians, and Jeremiah keeps preaching, go out and surrender to them, and they may let you live. Well, that's really terrible for morale. So they want to do him in, but Zedekiah is reluctant. And so that's when he gets thrown in the cistern, and all that kind of stuff, kind of like a prison, but they just forget to feed him down there. The Ethiopian eunuch guy takes care of him. But anyway, and Jeremiah, in one of his famous complaints in chapter 22, I think it is, talks about how everybody is waiting for him to slip. And how would that work out? What would be slipping? To say something that doesn't come true. Because then he would be marked as what? False prophet. See, and that's rooted in Deuteronomy 18, 21, 22, is you can tell that the prophet is false if what they predict doesn't happen. How about Hal Lindsey in the late great Planet Earth?
That was a block.
Well, put it in this context. Would that label that as false prophecy?
Yes.
Absolutely. Terry?
This is the only people say the world forget about this day, this time.
Sure.
Well, here.
Yeah, going back to William Miller in the 1830s, who had a whole bunch of people convinced the world was going to end. And he gave the time, the date, everybody was out expecting it, and this is night. And when it didn't happen, they all had to go home being mocked, it says, by the town drunk. Who followed them, making fun. But no, this happens over and over again. When people claim that, I found the secret, whatever it might be, a lot of times it's some kind of arcane mathematical thing.
Mystical thing.
Yeah, to figure out what scripture is really saying, and you can buy one of my books or tapes on the table at the door. No, that's false prophecy. Yeah. You would think they would get the idea that you're not supposed to try and figure it out because that's not what God wants. Yeah, when he says nobody knows, take him at his word. So we still do have this issue. The second marking for false prophets is that, again, Deuteronomy 13, 1-6, is that they lead God's people to idols. Yeah, to idol worship. And can we translate that into the modern era?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I can come back to the prosperity gospel as an example. That's, making God a means to an end. Yeah, be good, do God's will so I can get rich. Yeah, no, that's turning God, I'm sorry, that's focusing your attention not on God for God's sake, but for something else. And it can be money, it can be reunited with my dead husband or wife, it can be all kinds of things. And good things are more dangerous than bad things. It's far easier to without realizing it, to make an idol of something that is good. If you're going to make a devil, start with an archangel. Don't
Yeah.
start with your dog.
Wow, that's,
Yeah, no, it's, yeah. Yeah, the better the thing is, the more dangerous it can be. So, and then the third thing, this is from Jeremiah 23, is if they behave in an ungodly manner. That's easy enough to see. What are the only reasons that we can use to depose a pastor? Get rid of him. I'm not setting you up, by the
no,
way.
no, false
Yeah.
teaching or preaching.
False teaching, that's number one, right? You know, demonstrative false teaching. The second, used to be two, now generally we accept three different causes. False teaching, what's the second one? No, well, let's not limit it. Manifest and open immorality.
Yeah, bad living.
Yeah, and that, I'm using technical language. Manifest means obvious, yeah, and open immorality. The third one, which you find more and more in church constitutions and is accepted now, used to be just those two. What's the third one? Manifest inability to perform the duties of his office. This was notably kind of pushed for guys who might be 88, 90 years old, going senile, and you couldn't get them to give up. Yeah, that's a tricky one. I'm only 76. But yeah, there's no set age thing. The Pope did that with the cardinals and bishops now. What is the upper limit on them? Is it 80? I'm not sure, but the Pope, or it might be higher than that, but the Pope set an upper limit. Yeah.
Wouldn't that also, let's say, being negligent in the duties of the pastor fall into that? In other words, a pastor who is, I don't know, just plain lazy?
It would depend probably on the wording. That becomes difficult to prove also. See, and open to abuse. If we were to say that you could get rid of a pastor for being, quote, lazy, you don't want that to be a subjective judgment, of course.
Yeah.
It needs to be an objective judgment. So how on earth are you going to set an objective standard? Does that mean that he has to work 60 hours a week? And if it's under 60, he's lazy. If it's over 60, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Are you going to set it in a 40-hour work week? I don't think so. You see the problems. Yeah, so it's better to focus on, if the job is not being done, why is it not being done? See, and then comes the issue of incompetence or inability. Yeah, pops up. Anyway, there are other ways that congregations do this, but I will not go into those as a matter of principle and of self-protection. Okay. Anyway, any questions on this? See, again, to understand this paragraph positively, another way to get at it, I got at it as essentially elaborating on the prior paragraph about those who come as, wolves in sheep's clothing. But another thing also that you can focus on here is the distinction between what the person does outwardly and what they are inwardly. See, I never knew you. What is the verb to know against a Hebrew background? Not Greek, but against although this is written in Greek, but against a Hebrew background, what will to know mean?
Maybe try to trust.
We will move that way, but that is kind of pushing it to the edge. The verb know can refer to sexual relations.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that in the King James. It just woodenly translates, and now Abraham knew his wife Sarah, blah, 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 blah. The verb to know has overtones of experience, something, not just to know. We use the word noetically. That's very Greek. Know in terms of we have a head knowledge of something. Now, I don't want to go here into the head knowledge versus heart knowledge. That's a very modern kind of a thing. But in the Semitic context, to know, yada is the Hebrew verb, to know means that you are drawn into a relationship with something. Yeah, now we have overtones of that. If you know the name of something, if I go and lead a hike up in the hills here, and there's a bunch of weeds growing there. But if I point out certain ones and say, this wild mustard is the ancestor of these vegetables, and if you taste a little bit of it, it tastes kind of like broccoli, blah, 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 blah. You will never see that plant quite the same way again. Because what have you done?
Found out
You've
something.
named it, and in the process of naming it, you have entered into a relationship with it. That's true in baptism. Absolutely. The name is put on you. You're baptized in the name of the Trinity. And so that's putting a relationship onto the person. And that is encompassed in the verb in Hebrew to know. What about Arabic? Is Arabic similar? So after 18 months, you say, then you know them. Okay, that's probably a good wisdom. Yeah, but see, Greek, to know from a Greek perspective is to be able to consider a thing at a distance and to figure out how it works, what its essence is. And so the dominant sense in that relationship is the I. That comes into our way of thinking, because we are highly Greek in our thinking. I see what you mean. Yeah, the dominant sense is sight, and sight enables you to stand back from something. Right? It's great for science. Yeah, this kind of being divorced from value judgments or that is much about what the scientific method is concerned with, right? But on the other hand, see, for Hebrew, the dominant sense is hearing. Yeah, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. See, and hearing differs from sight in that hearing pulls you into a relationship. Because when something is said to you, hearing doesn't just mean it hits your eardrum and bounces off. It means it makes a demand on you, right? Yeah, and so issues of obedience, trust, those kinds of things, very relational. See, I'm echoing the sermon this morning where the Trinity is highly relational. So you're drawn into this. And so to know, then in a Hebrew sense, means to be pulled into the relationship with something. Right? And you can see how that can be applied to Abraham and Sarah. Yeah, and that. It's not that you're standing off at a distance and contemplating something as you would where you agree. So this relational aspect. So Jesus says, I never knew you. What is the implication there?
We didn't have a relationship.
Yes, there never was a relationship. Yeah, so that the things that were done, in his name. And remember, the disciples at one point say to Jesus, we saw this guy casting out demons in your name. Yeah, and in one version of it, Jesus is accepting of that, in other he isn't. no one who, does this in my name very shortly will be able to say anything bad about me. I think that's important. But anyway, so the idea here is, once again, to underscore from the sermon, relational. Yeah, see, even when we talk about the doctrine of the Trinity, we're not basically talking about something analytic. Yeah, that's kind of hopeless. You're not going to analyze the Trinity. Even even angels and archangels can't manage that trick. It's like it's like my dog trying to figure out what I'm doing when I'm working on the checkbook.
Yeah.
But I always know what I'm doing. Yeah, no, it's just, math is over their head.
Yes.
Yeah, our dog has a rudimentary sense of math. Yeah, she knows 1, she knows 2, and she knows more.
And time.
Yeah, time is kind of,
This one is good.
they're programmed to a particular time. That's, not time in the sense that they sit around and say, oh, this time next year I might not be here.
No, it just knows what dinner time is.
Yeah, it just knows, the years for Snoopy go like this, supper time. I'm getting silly, stop me. Okay, so there are some who profess allegiance to Jesus as Lord and who can back up the claim with impressive spiritual achievements, fruits explicitly in his name, but maybe they're unaware that they're on the outs, but maybe not. See, maybe the real focus here is on those who are unethically trying to make use of, abuse, or profit by things that we would normally associate with ministry. Okay? This kind of questioning, though, if you take it more in the issue of whether I'm saved or not, and do I know it, that kind of a thing, it was apparently in the light of that kind of painful spiritual self-examination that you've got something like 1 John written, which is a treatise, in a sense, a pastoral treatise that deals with this kind of stuff. By this you will know, see, that, when our hearts condemn us. So that's all there in that first letter of John. Kyrie, that's Lord, often means sir. But the doubling of the address here draws attention to it as important in its own right. So we're talking about people in the church. And the striking repetition 3 times of in your name is the more remarkable in that elsewhere what's done in Jesus' name is taken as a mark of genuineness. But apparently not here. Talked about to know. We've got, just for next time, then apparently the parable of the 2 builders. Questions?